you're seeing some of those discussions pop back up, whether it's on social media or what have you, about Linus Ullmark and whether or not the Bruins should look at moving this guy now in terms of just this season. People mention that Swayman's, taking a huge step forward in his development. Ullmark could get you a solid return at the deadline when teams are desperate for goaltending. I mean, hell, look at what the Edmonton Oilers are doing right now. Like, holy Christ, that's not great. And welcome into Poke the Bear, episode 176, presented by CLNS Media and sponsored by our good friends over at FanDuel. My name is Conor Ryan, and today, once again, we have a very special guest, 98.5 The Sports Hub's Ty Anderson. Ty, how you doing?
What's going on? How are we doing today?
I'm doing splendid. I'm doing great. In the process of bringing up Christmas ornaments, Christmas decorations. I think it's the perfect time to do it. That's my own personal take. I know some people get very offended. I don't know what it is about people repping Thanksgiving or repping that no man's land in between, like the Halloween, and people, I don't know, bring like a cornucopia up to put in your living room. Who gives a shit about that? We don't want that. We're all going into Christmas here, so we're in that process. How's everything going on with you?
You got to respect the holidays, man. You can't just be skipping them based on whether or not you want to observe them, man. There's like 3 more holidays between now and Christmas. You are jumping the gun, sir. You can't be doing that here.
No, there's nothing good in between that. I mean, like, what are we talking about? Like Thanksgiving?
You got Thanksgiving. You got a long weekend when you got Veterans Day. You got
that is true. It makes me sound like I don't like the troops. We have to.
That's what I'm saying. Like, you're letting your
scrub this audio.
You're letting your disdain of the foul bird really ruin everything. No, for me, honestly, I am in a relationship where Christmas is very popular, and for one person, and it's not as popular for the other. Not to say I don't like it, but the whole idea of, all right, Halloween's over, do the house completely over. It was never me. I never grew up in that kind of home, I feel. So when someone does it to me, it's like alien. I'm like, well, how you doing that? What are you talking about? We put ours up, Christmas Eve, I'm pretty sure. No, not that late. But nevertheless, I respect your willingness for Christmas. I just think you are leveling up, my friend.
Yeah, no, I mean, we'll know from next time we record an episode next week. I'll make sure, like, Mariah Carey's not blasting in the background or of the Christmas tree in the back. I won't have that. So I'll tone it down and make sure the studio's set. I won't have like tinsel hanging off the fan or anything like that. So I'll reel it in a little bit just for the podcast, but good to know where exactly you stand on that. But as we continue to, maybe we'll shift on from talking about the holidays. I know a YouTube commenter last week was incensed that we talk about Halloween candy, the gall of us doing that. So let's get right into the nitty-gritty of the Boston Bruins and look at this team. Once again, a really tough test down in Dallas against a very good Dallas Stars team with a pretty depleted roster. If you're the Bruins, come away with a 3-2 win. Again, wasn't pretty when you look at what they had to do when you have such a shorthanded decor, especially. I think this is going to be what most of these games are going to be in terms of these protecting 1-goal leads late, critical faceoffs in your own zone, all that fun stuff that makes, I think, a lot of writers stress out night in and night out when you're trying to hit deadline on a few stories. But again, this team seems to continue to have that mettle and will to kind of grind out these wins, get 2 points against really strong teams. And lots to talk about with this game, especially with the younger players. But I think the top player from that game last night, or on Monday night rather, was Jeremy Swayman. 35 saves, got a .952 save percentage so far this year, which I think leads the NHL amongst goalies with at least 5 starts. He's been tremendous this year out of the gate. And what I've seen a lot, Ty, over the last couple, week or so, especially with Swayman on this heater, people bringing up the same thing with the goalie tandem and the rotation and when they're going to deviate from it and what exactly the long-term plan is for this Bruins team this year. I wouldn't say like maybe a year or two down the road. That's another discussion we'll have a few months later. But do you see the Bruins being in the spot where they're eventually going to alter this pretty much 50-50 split you've seen so far from Jeremy Swayman to Linus Ullmark?
I don't see them altering it as much as maybe who you project as your 1A and your 1B might be. I mean, if push came to shove today, Jeremy Swayman's getting game one. Now, granted, they have 70 more games to go until you have to make that decision. A lot can change, obviously, but I think Swayman has come out of the gate flying. He's come out of the gate much like Linus Ullmark came out of the gate a year ago, where he just looks like he's on a different level. And you have this confidence when he's in net that they're going to find a way to win the game. And what's really interesting about that is that, Swayman has a 952. Linus has a 926. Like, it's not like he's playing poorly.
What a bum.
It like, that's a number that any team, would kill to have as a regular number right now, from their goaltender. So I just think that right now, it's like last year, but it's kind of flipped where I think that Swayman's just been undeniable out of the gate. And, I do weigh the competition. Not to say that Linus Ullmark has played only bad teams, but when you're Jeremy Swayman and you're missing half your NHL defense and you turn in some great outings against Toronto and against Dallas, like, that means something. That really does mean something. And so I just think he's been incredible. So I don't know if I'm changing the start calculation. I feel like they have that down, and they have a sweet spot internally that they want to get both guys to, or not have them, eclipse, so to speak. But I think maybe who is the 1A and who is the 1B, like, that's a legit conversation piece.
Yeah, no, especially when you're looking at the playoffs. And again, we're probably jumping the gun, or at least I am, in terms of looking ahead at that. And, I think you make a good point. If it's game one, it's probably Swayman right now, but maybe keep that rotation going in the playoffs and seeing what exactly you get, because that is one of the many second guesses you're taking back from that series against Florida. And it's one of those things too where employing like a goalie rotation in the playoffs does seem like it's something that a lot of teams really haven't done. But what an advantage you have if you have two number one guys, and how much of a nightmare is it for the opposing team when you don't have to game plan for one, potential Vezina candidate there, but you got two guys there, of just how much tougher that overall makes the game plan. So, yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head where I don't know if this is going to be something where we need Swayman to get, a 60-40 split or what have you. But if it's the baseline conversations of like, who's your number one right now, who's your 1A, right now it seems like it is Jeremy Swayman for just how strong he's been out of the gate. But another thing I've kind of noticed, Ty, is amid the discourse or conversations about how strong Jeremy Swayman has been, you're seeing some of those discussions pop back up, whether it's on social media or what have you, about Linus Ullmark and whether or not the Bruins should look at moving this guy now in terms of just this season. People mention that Swayman's, taking a huge step forward in his development. Ullmark could get you a solid return at the deadline when teams are desperate for goaltending. I mean, hell, look at what Edmonton Oilers are doing right now. Like, holy Christ, that's not great. But I think we're probably more or less on the same wavelength, right? Where as much as, that is a scenario that could play out if you're just looking at areas of need, subtracting from areas of strength from your own roster, that it gives you an impact player or a lot of draft capital. I can't see that being a really feasible thing happening this year, both in terms of Ullmark's contract and just how important you need those two guys locked in this season.
Yeah, I'm not touching it. It's a great thing. Don't fiddle with it. And the idea that you have to not have a tandem that's been strong as hell, I don't agree with that. I don't subscribe to that notion that you can't have two great goaltenders. I think especially when you're a team like the Bruins and you're not as deep down the middle, you're not as deep, I would say, on defense as you were a year ago, in the sense that life without McAvoy, it's been kind of illuminating in terms of how thin your margin of error really is, where you lose one of your horses and then a couple complementary pieces. And I know that's half a defense, but you think about that, and now you have to rely on your goaltending to win you games every night. You think about that loss in Detroit. I thought Linus did his job for about 50 minutes, like that, that should win you most games, I felt personally. So I'm not messing with it. They have such a good rapport, such a good chemistry. And I know people out there say, no, you don't do a rotation in the playoffs. Well, if there's one team that could, And one team that should, it's the Boston Bruins. And, I'm even starting to believe personally that the days of a 16-win goaltender are kind of starting to fade out of frame. And it doesn't have to necessarily be because you're splitting time, but Vegas went through 3 goalies last playoffs because of injuries. The year before that, the Avalanche had to soldier on without Darcy Kemper for a little bit there. I think they had a win. I want to say 3 or 4 games without him. So, your 2 most recent Cup winners have not had 16-game horses. They've gotten there on the back of one guy, but they've ultimately needed both. And so, and I think the other part of that, is that I don't think Brandon Bussey is being undeniable down in Providence. And for them to be comfortable with that move, you need to have that guy knocking on the door with a 960 saying, let me in. I'm not staying in Providence. Make room for me. I don't think you've seen that yet. And I don't think either one of these guys, Linus or Swayman, is necessarily a 55 to 60 game workhorse, especially if you want them to be upright for 4 rounds. So I'm not messing with it personally.
Yeah. I even look at, like, you kind of mentioned the fact that, yes, it's not maybe traditional that you have a full rotation in the playoffs or what have you. Even if, like, guy has a great game and you still want to swap those things out, like, yeah, maybe that's unconventional. Maybe that's something you don't see every day. But, like, I don't know. It's a different sport, I know, but it's like, I don't know. Look at, like, the Golden State Warriors, like, death lineup where everyone was like 6'8" and below hitting threes. If you showed that to, I'm not even talking about like old ass like the '60s Celtics where like Bob Cousy did one move and defenses crumble. I'm talking about like '80s basketball. If you showed that, people would be like, "Yeah, you can't win like that. Bunch of small guys just hitting threes." Like,
right.
Games evolve, and if it's whatever putting your team, your unique roster, your personnel in the best spot to succeed. I mean, hell, we could be going into the playoffs this year, and you look at this Bruins team. They could have 2 Vezina winners and two different Vezina winners in back-to-back years. Like, that's how it's looking right now. I know Demko's been great in Vancouver, and we got a long season to go, but you could be looking at that spot. Like, this is not a conventional roster of the way it's built and what this Bruins team needs to kind of rely on in terms of those guys. But I think even in the regular season, I think this is something you've mentioned before as to why this team is so good at avoiding long stretches of, a 1-2-2 stretch or what have you. Is that even we know what's going to happen. Inevitably, goaltenders are going to hit lulls. Having the luxury of having someone like Ullmark and Swayman to play off each other, that if things do go awry, like, these guys never run cold at the same time. So again, we're going to have a bump in the road with a guy like Swayman, a bump in the road with Ullmark. What prevents you from really sliding, especially when you have this team that, as you said, has a really small margin forever, has a lot of younger players, is having 2 guys that can really bail you out even when a lot of shit doesn't really go your way. And having that is something that I don't think you can replicate, even if trading Ullmark gets you maybe a piece or something that can fill out another area. It's not worth what the insurance is of having someone like Ullmark in place for this season.
Yeah, and the other part of that too is that how sold are you that you're going to get a worthwhile return? And that was sort of the biggest issue, read between the lines last summer, is that everyone knew the Bruins situation, everyone knew their cap space nightmare, and nobody was offering them anything good for their goaltending. And at a certain point, you realize, okay, you know what, this is worth more to us than it is on the trade market. And whether that's fair or not, I mean, that's the economic reality of this league for a lot of teams. I mean, I don't really think a lot of teams out there are going to be able to stomach trading a first round pick plus for one of these guys, which is what the Bruins should get. If the Bruins are trading Linus Ullmark or trading Jeremy Swayman, they should be getting a first round plus, in my opinion. Like, that is kind of how I look at it, because that's how valuable these guys are. And so if you're not getting that, it's a non-starter for me. And I don't think you're going to get that from the Kings or the Oilers. Like, as desperate as they may be, that feels like an offseason trade more than a deadline trade for a multitude of reasons, I think.
Mm-hmm. And also, not to be forgotten in this whole, potential scenario, Linus Ullmark with a modified no trade clause, I believe. I don't think he wants to go to Edmonton. That's just a hunch. Again, don't know. Maybe he loves Edmonton. Maybe he loves going to the mall up there. That is also something that I think plays into it, that I think Linus really likes where he is right now. And that is just another thing that, I mean, hell, what was that, Torrey Krug? Didn't he nix a trade with his no trade clause, like, during the offseason? Like, that is something that players don't have just for the sake of having it. Like, that is something that can curtail a trade or what have you as well. So
Yeah.
that's definitely something to keep tabs on as well.
There's the idea that, oh, you'll just say yes because you don't want to stay in a city where they don't necessarily want you. No, well, those trade protections are in there for a reason. Like some guys, not to say they're spiteful, but they will be, sort of like, no, you signed me to this contract. I want to be here. Figure it out how I stay, but I'm not going. And that's well within their rights. Like it's in the rights of a team to try to move a player. So I think many people incorrectly subscribe to the idea that, oh, well, anyone's going to waive their no trade if they're not wanted. No, guys will stay. If they have homes and families and kids, they will stay.
Absolutely. So again, as intriguing as it is to talk about the goalie tandem being broken up or shifting drastically, even if Swayman keeps on posting shutouts and really strong performances, I don't see it changing anytime soon. So we still have more to talk about with this win over the Dallas Stars. But before we kind of dive into maybe some of the younger players that impressed on Monday night, let's take a quick break and hear from our sponsors over at FanDuel.
Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use and you can bet on everything from spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. And frankly, that's the best part about FanDuel, that you can bet on anything. You want to bet on how many wins the Patriots are going to have this year? Be my guest. Maybe how many shutouts Jeremy Swayman's going to have this season. Go for it. You can really do it all. So bet now on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. So visit FanDuel.com/Boston and kick off the NFL season with an offer you don't want to miss. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
Once again, shout out to our good friends and sponsors over at FanDuel. All right, Ty, let's talk about some of the younger players that impressed on Monday night in Dallas. Starting with Mason Lohrei, a guy that I think everyone is enamored with off of just, the tangible production is there, right? Gets an assist against Toronto, plays over 20 minutes, scores his first goal in Dallas. It's easy to, I think, be really impressed by what his skill set is, right? I mean, there's a lot of puck-moving, offensively gifted defensemen, not a whole lot that are also 6'5", right, in terms of what he can bring. But I do find it interesting. Like, we'll talk, I think, a few weeks down the road as to where exactly this D-core all gets sorted out once McAvoy and Forbert and Grizzly come back. But people who I think are operating with the fact that, Lohrei scores a goal and all of a sudden he's all set. Don't have to go back down to Providence. Like, he is locked in for an NHL spot this season. I don't really see that being a foregone conclusion because, again, as talented as he is, and I think he's really accelerated his developmental timeline, still has a few things to work on, I think.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. On Monday night, he gets benched for the final stretch of the game. After Dallas makes it a 1-goal game, he's riding the pine. It's not happening in Providence. If it's Providence, he's right back out there because those are developmental minutes. And I think that is sort of what people tend to have a hard time grasping. And I say that with no malice, but at the end of the day, NHL coaches want to win. So yeah, it's easy for us to sit here on the couch and say, hey, put him right back out there. But it's another thing to execute it as a coach. These guys want to win. And if you're going to be making mistakes in your own zone and the puck's going to end up in the back of your net or you're going to get hemmed in, a coach is going to sit you down. Like at this level, they're going to sit you down. Doesn't matter how good you've been to that point. Doesn't matter what your ceiling is as a prospect. They're going to try to win that night's game. That's their job. Their job isn't player development. It's part of their job, sure, but on a night-to-night basis, it's not what they do. And so, I think that there's a little bit of watching with our hearts versus our eyes when it comes to Mason Lohrei and his readiness right now. I see a player who has tons of room to grow, especially defensively. And there's nothing wrong with that unless you stick him on a third pairing, playing him 14 minutes a night in Boston, because that's not going to help him. He needs minutes and reps and learning the pro game. I think people grossly misunderestimate just how new he is to A, defense, and B, the pro game.
Yeah.
Like he needs some time. He needs some seasoning. It's great. The meal is going to be delicious, but you got to let it marinate. You got to let it finish cooking. I don't think he's done cooking for as good as he's been. And I think saying that is not an indictment on him. It's reality. This time last year, he's playing Ohio State. This time 2 years ago, or 2.5 years ago, he's in juniors. Like, it's not the worst thing in the world to say that he needs a bit more time. And so I think that's where he's at. I mean, you see the skill set. It's there. It's very raw, though. And when you mix a very raw skill set with a team that wants to win now, that's how you lead to kind of some iffy development on the fly, I think. And that's kind of where you don't want to be if you're the Bruins.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you look at his skill set and how intriguing he is. I mean, hell, like, if he hits his ceiling as a 6'5" guy that can play heavy minutes and can really generate a lot of offense, like, you've got a John Carlson on your hands, which not a lot of teams have. And the Bruins would love to have a guy like that in their lineup. But as you said, I think that game against Dallas is like the perfect way of mapping out just why Providence shouldn't be viewed as like being sent to the gulag, right? Because as you said, Jim Montgomery and the Bruins are trying to win. Like, he has that goal, but if you're going to make a few lapses in the D zone, you're not going to stick him out there. Like, if that's in Providence and he has that in a game against Hartford or Springfield, yeah, he's still going to play. He's still going to finish with 24 minutes, and you take the good and the bad, because down there, the main focus beyond just obviously doing well down there is development and getting guys, to fight through these challenges. Like, same with a guy like Fabian Lysell, all those players down there, it's geared primarily towards developing and then going through the ups and the downs of the season. The Bruins can't necessarily afford to have that same, amount of rope for some of their younger players, if these guys are going to have those lapses. And Lohrei's a guy that, as you said, he's got a fascinating development kind of path that he only started playing defense a couple of years ago. Like, he's kind of like he's like Anthony Davis, where he was like a 6'1" guard, then just got huge over one summer, and kind of that, again, he has the skill set where he kind of plays like a guard, but the size makes him a really unique player. It's kind of the same thing with Lohrei and how he handles the puck and how shifty he is, and that skill set on the back end. Not a lot of guys have that, but if he's going to learn on the fly, and again, like, hell, he could replicate and have a few more games like he did against Toronto and kind of steer that conversation or really shore up his game. But if he's going to be, on the road and teams have last change and they're going to be feasting on whatever D pair he's on, and it's going to, again, it's one thing where if he's going to be kind of always, trying to stay above water, but if he's going to be playing 14 minutes a night and be sheltered or not being put in spots to succeed, there's nothing wrong with sending down to Providence for a little bit. That's not to say that you're sent down there and you're banished there for the year. Like, hell, this guy could be back up in January, February for a full-time role. He keeps on making those steps forward.
Yeah, and the main point that I want to emphasize is that I don't think through 3 games he's done anything to necessarily make the Bruins situation or decision more difficult. And when I say that, I mean, I don't think he's making them think, oh, we got to trade Derek Forbort, or we got to trade Matt Grzelcyk, or we got to waive Kevin Shattenkirk. Like, I don't see that part of it happening just yet. And sure, listen, like, you're going to have one more game without Charlie McAvoy. You're going to have probably 4 or 5 more games without Matt Grzelcyk. Like, so he has a chance here to make it interesting. It's just right now, I don't think that he is making them sweat to the point where they go, we got to make a secondary move here, especially when, the end goal as it currently stands is, he goes down to Providence and just plays 10 more minutes per night. Oh, and by the way, we don't have to trade or waive anybody. Like, this is a team that I think I never thought during training camp when he was making his late push, and I'm not sure how you feel about this, I never once got the sense that the Bruins were eager to trade a defenseman off their roster. It's just, it goes against their organizational MO. Like, they are obsessed with their defensive depth because it goes out the window every postseason. Think about how many playoff runs they've had to go 10 deep into their bag. They have an extremely limited interest in trading defensemen. And so the idea that, they're going to make a trade to make room for Lohrei, I thought it was crazy back in September. I thought it was far-fetched in October, and I think it's far-fetched now. I don't think that they have the pressing need or the pressing feeling that they need to do this quite like some fans do online. I'm not sure how you feel about it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm still haunted by, the Ottawa series when you had, what was it, like Tommy Cross, great guy, even for a BC guy, great guy. Joe Morrow, these guys, like that was like a big chunk of what your decor was in that playoff series. Like that is always what's lodged in the back of my mind. And that happens every single year, every single postseason. You need as many guys as possible that even if, it's all about, I think we get to the playoffs, people are obsessed with like the starters, the labels of what these guys are. You're going to need every single guy to pull on the rope at some point in a playoff series to succeed. So again, looking down the road, barring whatever moves are made at the deadline, what have you, you're going to need a guy like Derek Forbort to be pressed into the lineup for PK work if need be. Grzelcyk, where he can play on the left or right side, that puck-moving talent, there's value there. If Lohrei takes a big step forward, you'll take that. Shattenkirk, like all these guys, a guy who's been there before with a team like Tampa who needed a kind of a revamp after a crushing first-round exit. All those guys are not anyone that I think you look at them and be like, yeah, that fifth-round pick. Let's clear space for Lohrei. Like, again, you shouldn't take that mindset of we need to subtract a useful NHLer off of our roster just to accommodate Lohrei. If Lohrei pushes, whether it's now or months down the road, like that's great. And that is a great problem to have, but that also should, force you to then just move a useful piece for pennies on the dollar.
Yeah. And the other part of it too, Connor, is that, listen, we all know that if they need a spark or they need an actual defensive upgrade in game 2 or game 3, it's going to be Lohrei. It's not going to be Ian Mitchell. It's not going to be Parker Wotherspoon. It's going to be Mason Lohrei. But what happens between now and then, I wouldn't speak in any sort of definitive nature in terms of like, he's got to be here or he's got to be in Providence. I'm just trying to bring to the conversation that he's been good. He had a great game, I thought, against Toronto. Since then, little iffy. I would not be speaking like he's a stone cold lock to be with this team for the rest of the season. I think there's a bit too much of that going on right now. The narrative around him, I just think he's still so raw. He's got talent like crazy. It's just, you want to make sure you're putting that talent in the best situation to succeed. You also don't want to be in the business of, and we've talked about this before, I'm pretty sure, you don't want to be in the business of having to repair confidence, right? And so I think that's something you got to be mindful of with Lohrei too, is that putting him in the best situations to succeed. And I think that means giving him minutes and minutes and minutes. And I don't think he's going to get that, if and when this team is fully healthy, especially when they get, on the left side, when you get Matt Grzelcyk and Derek Forbort back, that eats into his all situation minutes, in my opinion.
Absolutely. It'll be definitely something fascinating to watch, especially once they start getting more healthy bodies back there on the blue line. And before we wrap things up, obviously, you look at the rest of the younger players the Bruins have on the roster. Matt Poitras takes a lot of the headlines there, but the main guy that has been maybe the steadiest in terms of what exactly his role is. Again, maybe not flashy, but Johnny Beecher, good to see him get rewarded with a great goal against Dallas. But you look at just the way I think he's playing in that role, how good he's been on faceoffs, and really how impressive that fourth line of him. Dan Heinen got his first point, great play by him, and Oscar Steen. Like, he's providing a spark on that fourth line with also a group of line mates that, if you asked us before the year, if that was a group that could really make an impact, like we looked at Lucic and Lauko as being the perfect complements for what a guy like Beecher can bring. But Beecher, for what his role is, has been really, really solid out of the gate.
Yeah, and honestly, I felt like he needed that goal on Monday night. And I say that not because he's been bad per se, but let's be real. That line has lacked a little bit of pop since losing Lucic and Lauko. And so to get Beecher kind of going without those players, I think is big for his confidence. I think it's, that's a great goal too. Like, that's not, he kept joking after the game. I thought my goal was going to be worse. No, that's a skillful goal. I mean, that's a goal that, I think is not your average fourth line center sniping at home, especially against a great goaltender like Jake Ottinger. Like, so I think it's huge. I think it's huge for his confidence. You look at his deployment, the way they use him, the night that they had in general, you mentioned the Heinen, Beecher, Steen line. The night they had in general was incredible, especially matched up against who they were matched up against. Like that's big. If this line, independent of who the wings are, can be utilized as a defensive stopper, oh man, now you have to worry about 10 fewer minutes, over the course of a 60-minute night. And that's, again, we've talked about the margins for this team. That's gigantic. Not having to worry about that is huge. I've loved John Beecher's PK work. I've loved it.
Yeah.
And so if he can continue to round out his game and become more of a scoring threat, at 5-on-5 on the kill, like I think when he and DeBrusque are together, that can be a fun combo to watch shorthanded in terms of their ability to create some offense. So it's great to see Beecher finally on the board. Heinen, I think, for those of you guys who are not watching with your 2019-20 blinders on, he's been very good. He's been making plays. It's been 3 games, I know, or 4 games now. He's making plays. He looks good. And I think that, he gets something tangible on Monday night with the assist. But things are happening when he's on the ice, and they've been good for the Bruins. So I like the complexion of that fourth line right now. It'll be really interesting to see what happens once Lucic and Lauko come back. I have to imagine Heinen just becomes your 13th forward, and then you send down, whoever, whether it's Steen, Brown, however that all shakes out. But I think you're getting value add from that line, and I think John Beecher is a big reason why. And it's just great to see him finally get some production to get out of maybe his head. Not to say he was in it, but it avoids that from, I think, festering, so to speak.
Yeah, I think you even look at that. He had that shorthanded chance. I believe it was during the home loss to Anaheim where he had that shorthanded look, and it, I think, brings off the post. And as you said, I think him and DeBrusque together, that seems like a duo that is destined for at least 1 or 2 really impressive shorthanded goals this year to keep on playing to that level. But it'll be really fascinating to see how that fourth line does pan out because, again, Heinen's been really solid out of the gate, right? Like if he's either fights for a spot over a guy like Lauko, or it ends up being your 13th forward, he's a guy that I think you can slot in there and brings value. I mean, he even didn't get an assist on it, but him diving for that puck and keeping it in and regaining possession helped lead up to that goal, the Carlo to Zacha goal against Toronto as well. Like he does those little things that, as much as people think that he's just a blank slate out there, like he makes those small hustle plays or those plays across, along the board that contribute to winning plays. He's like, Jalen Heinen's kind of like Marcus Smart in a way, right? Makes those small little winning plays. Maybe not as bombastic as Marcus Smart, but does the little things that maybe doesn't lead to a secondary helper or what have you, but always does contribute. So definitely
he's like a cheap Kike Hernandez. You know what I mean? Like it's like Kike before he got the money. You know what I mean? You can put him anywhere and you're like, all right, we're okay right here. That's fine. Listen, it's great if he goes all-star on you. He's probably not gonna. I think that was 2 years ago in Pittsburgh, and that's probably the last time you're going to see that. But what I loved, quickly on Beecher, what I loved is that season high, 13 minutes of time on ice Monday, his worst face-off game of the season, but he finds a way to impact the game. Like that's growth. That like winning face-offs was his ticket to this roster. It wasn't with him on Monday night, but he finds another way to impact the game. That's a sign of a guy who's adapting to the pro game, adapting to what it takes to stick at this level and moving forward. So I that's what impressed me the most, I think, about his performance Monday was that his bread and butter so far out of the gate wasn't there, and it was arguably still his best game as a pro, which I think that means something. That really does.
Absolutely. So it'll be definitely really interesting to see how guys like Beecher, Lohrei, Poitras, all the young guys especially continue to kind of develop and grow over these next couple of games, especially going into a game against the New York Islanders, which, again, they refuse to play Sorokin. We'll see if that happens once again. I don't know what it is with the Islanders not wanting to play him, but definitely something worth keeping tabs on for that home game on Thursday night. But I think that will wrap up our latest episode of Poke the Bear. Ty, where can we find all of your great work on the interwebs?
You can find it on 985sportshub.com, which I believe we're getting a website redesign. I'm not sure if it's gone live yet, but I've heard rumblings of that happening. So hopefully it's all there. Hopefully it doesn't get lost in the internet during a changeover. So that'd be no good. But yes, you can find me there. You can also find me on X at _Ty Anderson, SON, not SEN, in case you're ever curious. And yeah, we'll be there just being a goof, being a dummy, and having some fun. So catch me there anytime.
Absolutely. And if you guys want to read any of my stuff, go to boston.com, Boston Globe, and you can also find all of my GIFs and tweets and all the other shenanigans on X or Twitter, whatever the hell you want to call it, at Conor Ryan _93. So that will do it for our latest episode of Poke the Bear. I'm Conor Ryan. That's Ty Anderson. Thank you guys for listening.